Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. Today's feature is on Tokyo Game Show 2025, and video game PR guru Kyle, aka Mr. Knives, is back to chat about the massive event. We run down the incredibly impressive Switch 2 demos, the wildest booths, and detail everything about Japan's biggest gaming expo. In the game section, I look at the hotly anticipated Hades 2 and the not hotly anticipated Fire Emblem Shadows. Let's start with the feature on Tokyo Game Show 2025 with Mr. Knives. Today's feature is all about the 2025 Tokyo Game Show, the biggest gaming expo in Japan. It wrapped up a few days ago. I went, and my special guest also went, so we're going to talk about all the amazing games, booths, and other oddities we came across at TGS. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kyle, or MRK, Mr. Knives, as my Twitch name is, and I've been in Japan for about 3 years or so, and primarily work with public relations for different games and different publishers.
Thanks for joining me yet again. Believe it or not, you were actually my first guest to appear in consecutive episodes of the podcast. So it really is a month of Kyle for the Tokyo Game Life listeners.
Ooh, what an honor.
You were on last episode to talk about the Video Game Prom, the biggest gaming party in Tokyo. So before we get into TGS, how did Video Game Prom go this year?
It went extremely well, actually. Every year, we always hope there's a balance of people who have come over the last several years versus new faces and new people showing up from all over the industry, not necessarily just games. And I feel like we achieved that this year. The Y2K throwback was a good choice in terms of aesthetic. A lot of people remarked that they just had fun. It was fun to reminisce about that era, dress up like that era. Saw a lot of people dressed up like that. Talk about the games that came from that era as well. I heard several people talking about, when they first got a GameCube and things like that. Overall, it was just a good, solid, fun, nostalgic time. I'm glad we were able to share that with everybody here.
Awesome. Well, after the biggest party is the biggest event, Tokyo Game Show 2025, featuring a lot of upcoming games from Japanese developers and beyond. Now, you are in the game industry, and I attended this year for the first time as press, so we had very different experiences than your average TGS goer. We'll share our unique experiences. But before we dig into the games, let's dig into the vibes. Did TGS feel any different this year for you?
Not really, honestly. It felt, for the most part, a continuation of how it's always been since I've gone. In terms of other shows and showcases, TGS is just giant. There's so much there. A lot of newcomers come, from overseas, and they say, how does this compare to something like Summer Games Fest or PAX East or something like that? And it just absolutely dwarfs it in terms of that, not just in the type of games that are there, but in terms of the booth size and how much is there as well. So out of all the showcases and expos that I've been to, it's definitely probably has to be towards the top in terms of being the largest and most bombastic that you can imagine.
I'm sure it definitely has way more cosplayers than Gamescom or Summer's Games Fest, for sure.
Definitely.
But we'll get into that in a bit. On the business days alone, Thursday and Friday, Sessa, who runs TGS, they reported that over 50,000 people came each day. And this is on business day. So most people cannot attend during this time. Did you feel like this year was more crowded than the previous years?
The first time I went for business day was last year. And I was still really surprised at how many people were there, despite it just being business day and being limited to a certain amount of people. This year felt a little bit busy, especially Friday. The lines were decently long to get through. There were obviously some congestions of trying to move around and people kind of pooling in one area, trying to queue up for a line. So compared to last year, it definitely felt busier and a bit more crowded.
Yeah, it was my first time coming as press, and I did feel, okay, there are a lot of people here, but it is manageable compared to the public day. I never had to wait an hour plus to play a game, which was a huge relief. So it was a really interesting experience to see the difference between public day and the press day. But yeah, there was more people than I expected on the press day. I assumed the only people coming in here are press and the people who have actual business. But there are other people as well, people who have some sort of VIP pass, just people who, I don't know, they snuck in, people who don't have press passes, but I don't know who they are or what's their association with games. Even though it's tens of thousands of people less than public day, which is a relief, even though 50,000 sounds like a lot, and it is. You will be stuck shoulder to shoulder in front of the Konami booth, but it's still much easier than the public day. So there's tons of games featured, and this was definitely a big year for, well, I guess it depends on which Japanese publisher you are. Some are a bit more prominent than others in terms of the new games they brought. So I guess we should just get into the games. We could jump into the Nikkei Gacha with real girls, or talk about the multi-story booths, or the zombies walking around. But let's start with the games and then come back to the other stuff. You actually had to work during TGS, so getting in some game time is a luxury. But were you able to try any game demos? And if so, what was the one that really stuck out to you?
Yeah, so there are several games that I was lucky enough to try in between meetings and things like that. So there are several that stuck out to me. One of them was, and I think it might have had like one of the biggest booths there where they might have given away the best merch. I always pronounce this wrong because I want to say Anata, like the
Yes.
Japanese word Anata, but it's not that, even though it'd be a great name. It's Ananata, I think it's called.
It's Ananta.
Right.
That's how you spell it. I don't know how to say it either. It's Ananta, or it's very confusing. But yes, I know what game you're talking about.
Yeah, it always trips me up. And it caught my attention because the gameplay preview went on the PlayStation channel on YouTube. And I think within 2 days, it got over 2 million views, which for, as somebody who works in PR and promotion, seeing that on any kind of game trailer is a huge deal. So I was very curious about that because it seemed like a combination of pretty much every AAA game that's come out within the last 15 years or so. And I was curious to see what it was about. And I played it. There were 2 sections, and one of them was a scripted, not quite on rails, but if you've ever played Uncharted 4 with the car chase in there, it's extremely similar to that. And then if you had time left after that, it was a open world where you could jump between different characters in this city, which really resembled Tokyo, honestly. And despite being very similar to many of us that played before, it felt nice. It felt real. In addition to playing the demo, I tried to just do things like see if I can go out of bounds, just to see if it was real, because it seemed so unbelievable that it wasn't real, but it was, and it played nice, actually. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how this game is going to be possible. I don't know. I thought it was a gacha game, but now it's not a gacha game. So I have no idea how this game's going to make money. But from what I played, I thought it was pretty good.
I think for a lot of listeners, maybe you don't remember the name, but you have probably seen this trailer, because I think the best way to describe it is like anime GTA. It looks like the original trailer looked like GTA, but it's just an anime type of aesthetic. And yeah, it has like every single gameplay segment looks like Uncharted 4, and the next one will look like GTA, and the next one will look like Spider-Man. The booth was really cool because it had, I don't know, was it like a car or something? And then like an anime girl was standing on top of the car. It is a very distinct booth.
It's like one of the armored cars in the demo, I think it was.
And you mentioned before that it had some of the best swag. And this is the one swag item that I think was maybe the best, or at least the most prominent, and that turned heads. Can you describe what was the Ananta swag that you found?
It's basically a giant material backpack that you carry. And when I say giant, like it's not like a little tiny bag or a little tiny backpack. It's probably bigger than an average backpack. One of the main characters was on it, and she was wearing sunglasses. And when you flip off the top of the backpack, she's not wearing sunglasses anymore. It was extremely sturdy. It was very large, so you could just fit everything in there. And like it was almost like a lime green color, so it was very vivid. And like you could spot it from practically the other end of the hall. There were so many people walking around with this bag because some of the free giant bags hand out there, like EA's Battlefield 6 and a few other games, they never seem to run out of these bags. If you walked to the booth, regardless of the time you went, you were getting a bag. Who knows how many they ordered. In addition to that, they handed out, I don't know if they had collab with like Famitsu. It was like a Famitsu magazine set up to talk about this city and this game and these people like they were real people. And they gave that away, I think, for playing the game. And they gave away stickers. They gave away like a 3D pop-up if you actually got to physically play the game. They gave away badges. And they just gave you so much. And the quality of it was just, I was very surprised. Because most of the time, everybody talks about you get the swag from Tokyo Game Show, and then eventually, like, you toss it or whatever. You're like, I don't need it anymore. But I'm just really surprised. I'm looking at the bag right now, actually, and I'm so surprised that they gave something like that away. When I saw everybody walking around with it, that's definitely a win in the book, because regardless of whether you played the game or not, you saw the bag, you saw the backpack, and you saw the name printed on there. So it definitely caught a lot of attention.
This is something that you would not miss if you were walking around TGS. So many people had it, and it is gigantic. It's like the size of a person, and it has this cool aesthetic where the top flap is like the character's top head, and then they have the sunglasses. I flip it over and they don't have the sunglasses anymore. It's just a really interesting design. I have another cool swag I want to mention, but I think this was definitely the most eye-catching one. This is a Chinese developed game, which I think is another trend in TGS. There's a lot of Korean and Chinese developers who had gigantic booths. And are they gacha games? Are they not? I don't know. Some of them are a little ambiguous about if they are gacha or if they're not, but a lot of them are these free-to-play type of games with an anime aesthetic and girls wearing some liberal use of clothing. We'll talk about some of the crazier booths later on. But you also said you also played Onimusha as well.
Yeah, I played Onimusha. Booth was not as crazy as Anta or some of the other Chinese and Korean booths there. But I think just Capcom in general, they always seem to have a big presence at TGS, and this year wasn't any different. If you walk by, like, they had a huge giant screen that was like Resident Evil Requiem just on there. But going to play the game Onimusha, as somebody who's played all the games and enjoyed them and was able to just go in and give it a try, overall, I liked it. It plays much differently than the previous titles. It's not as much just a hack and slash. This seems to be a bit more strategy implemented into it in terms of countering, blocking, dodging, somewhat similar to a Souls game because you have to be very deliberate. You can't just spam block and push forward to counter. You can't just spam dodge. You have to anticipate when enemies are coming towards you. Counter, dodge, and do it all in one fluid motion, so it looks very cinematic. It took me a bit of time to get used to that, but once you get it, and once, like, you understand, you can't play this like the old games, you have to play this game, it felt good. There was weight to it, but a good type of weight. It's the weight that in a game communicates, like, you are damaging somebody, and you are moving, and you just narrowly missed that attack. There was enough time in the demo where you can get a feel for that, and it felt good. And visually, it looked fantastic. Admittedly, a bit darker than the previous games. Maybe it's the Resident Evil engine. The whole tone is definitely a bit darker and a bit grimmer, but it fits. Again, it fits. I need to play more, obviously, before I give like my final say on it, what I think. I was very thankful to play what I could. The bit that I did play, I ended up liking it. At the end of the day, it intrigued me and made me want to play more, which I guess is the point of a good demo for a game.
Did you beat the boss of the demo?
I did beat the boss, yes.
Oh, cool. I did not. I also played Onimusha, so we can get into that. Onimusha Way of the Sword, the new Capcom game that's coming out next year, I believe. And this is a big reboot for Onimusha. And the original games are... I actually played Onimusha 1 for the first time ever this year.
Nice.
And it is like a... It was pitched as Samurai Resident Evil. They do have action elements, but they are not what you would consider to be a modern-day action title. But this one was a bit closer. And I think a lot of people are describing it as sort of... kind of like Sekiro, but a bit easier than Sekiro, which is just like an onslaught. But it is very parry-focused. They give you the sheet of the controls beforehand, and like every button was like a different type of parry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is very parry-focused, but not as difficult in terms of the Sekiro parrying. You do have to be deliberate, which you mentioned, but there is some grace period. It's not like there's 100 people attacking you at the same time. I was very impressed by the game. It looks beautiful, and I do like the more kind of deliberate sword action. You can still just jam the action button and do a combo as long as you're not being attacked. But you do need to think about where the enemies are, and you do need to really prepare to parry as opposed to just dodging or guarding. And the boss, I didn't beat the boss. I admit that. It took me on the third try, the demo just stopped. They're just like, you know what? We're just going to end the demo. I'm tired of you trying to get to the boss. But yeah, the boss was a bit more, I would say, kind of Souls-esque battle where it is a bit slower and they have a big health bar at the top and you got to kind of whittle it down. You don't have any attack that does a quarter of damage or anything like that. But it was a very interesting take on the series. It is a bit Souls focused and also a mix of Sekiro. So I am curious about what else what's the other X factor here? I'm interested about the exploration, or are there these sort of survival horror or puzzle elements in here as well that aren't in the Souls games, and see how that's different. And they also have the actual gauntlets were there on as the display. And I guess I want to talk about, before we move on to different games, the Capcom booth in general, because I think Capcom was definitely, in terms of the big Japanese developers, they had the biggest presence. And they brought 4 heavy hitters. They had Onimusha Way of the Sword, they had Resident Evil 9, they had Monster Hunter Stories 3, and Pragmata. All these games are coming out pretty early next year. Did you try out Resident Evil 9 at all? Resident Evil Requiem?
Unfortunately, no. And that was actually one of the ones I really wanted to try out by the time my meetings were done. they were done for the whole day. And again, to go back, this is on a business day, so I can't imagine you would have to get there at 5 a.m. to reserve your time if you were going on public day. But no, they were done. I heard they had it available to play on the Switch 2. As soon as I saw it at the Nintendo Direct, I was curious on how would that play on the Switch 2? How would it look? And unfortunately, I couldn't make my way over there. No, unfortunately, I didn't get to play it, even though I really, really wanted to.
Well, fortunately, I did get to play it, and on the Switch too, so you're going to hear about it right now.
Oh, so, great.
Because my mission at TGS was to check out as many Switch 2 demos as I could, because this is the first TGS in a post-Switch 2 world, and I was very curious to see if they would have Switch 2 demos, and there were quite a lot. Resident Evil Requiem, Resident Evil 9 on Switch, that was maybe the golden goose when it came to what I wanted to play. And let me preface this, I am not a Resident Evil fan. I don't like scary games. I played Resident Evil 1 on the GameCube, and it was too scary, and I quit, and I just don't play that genre. Kirby is more my speed when it comes to horror. That's the level of horror I can digest. But as a huge AAA release coming day one on Switch 2, out of sheer curiosity, I had to try it. And I got to say that this is the new benchmark for third-party ports on Switch 2. It is kind of crazy that Switch 2 keeps getting more impressive ports of these huge titles. First, it was Cyberpunk, then it was Star Wars Outlaws, and then Final Fantasy VII Remake. That looks perfect on Switch 2, but I think Resident Evil 9 is maybe the new king of the mountain when it comes to big third-party AAA games on Switch 2. And this game had the dreaded timed entry ticket, where you need to get a ticket and come back later. You said you couldn't get a timed entry ticket, but was there any other games where you were able to nab a timed entry ticket for?
Battlefield, I was able to. For the portion that I wanted to play, because they had it split up between single player and multiplayer, and I did want the dog tag they were giving there, and it would be an item when the game came out. That was one that I was able to grab, and I think that was it in terms of just like the giant booths on there. TGS is just wild. It's just like a free-for-all when you're there.
Yeah, you really never know what is going to need a timed entry ticket, because Ninja Gaiden 4, which I'll come back to later, I needed a timed entry ticket for that, and that was a bit surprising. I didn't think that would be as popular. But for example, Monster Hunter Stories 3 didn't need a timed entry ticket. Onimusha didn't need it. So it is really random. Oh, is Ninja Gaiden 4 more popular than Onimusha and Monster Hunter Stories? I don't know. But I actually wanted to play Hyrule Warriors first, since that's the game with the strongest Nintendo connection. But I could not find the Koei Tecmo booth for the life of me when I got into the TGS. Which, by the way, the press entry section is in this weird area where you go in behind Battlefield 6 and Devolver Digital. So I'm like, I don't know where I am when I get into TGS, and I'm panicking because like I got to get to Hyrule Warriors, and my plan was to do Hyrule Warriors first and then Resident Evil second. And I'm glad that did not work out, because there was no way I'm getting to Resident Evil second if I went to Hyrule Warriors first.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just wandered around. I could not find the Koei Tecmo booth, but I found the Capcom booth, which was massive. It had the huge LED screen of Resident Evil. So if you want these loud zombie screens, they were there. And I got there, I don't know, like 10:05 or 10:10 or something like that. And I got a timed entry ticket, and they gave it to me 1:30 p.m. for PS5. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to play the PS5 game. I came here for Switch 2. And I told them this, and they swapped my ticket. And Switch 2 is for 10:30. So I'm like, okay, this is much more manageable. I guess the Resident Evil fan base is mostly on PS5. But I would think the Switch 2 version is the biggest curiosity. They didn't have as many Switch 2 kiosks there for Resident Evil. So I got really lucky that I wanted to play the quote-unquote downgraded version of Resident Evil 9. But this was the perfect time, because I got it at like 10, and 20 minutes later, you can play RE9 on Switch 2. So I guess I'll get into it. It was really the opening of the game. It was only on handheld mode, so I wasn't playing docked. It was a 17-minute demo, which is a random time limit.
Yeah.
But it was 17 minutes, they told me. And it was first person. I think you can switch between third person, but I just didn't know how to do that, or I didn't press the right buttons. And when I was playing it, I was thinking, is this 60 FPS? Because it felt 60 FPS, but that's a little unbelievable. But other people were saying, yeah, it's 60 FPS. And so I was kind of thinking, okay, this looks like 60 FPS, but there's no way that it's running at 60 FPS portable on Switch 2. But it was. I was doubting myself because I couldn't really even believe it at the time. And the game has really incredible lighting. Of course, Switch 2, the portable mode, it supports ray tracing. So yeah, it looks incredible portably on Switch 2. And the first part of the game is like you wake up in some room and you're looking at it's typical Resident Evil stuff. You're in a house And there's a key here that you need to get, and then you can't open this door, so you got to go a different way. And it was really great because it was totally dark, but then you can turn on the lights on and off, so you can really get a great feel of the lighting, the differences between it. There's a window open with some light streaming in. There's a room that's lit up by, only a red light. There's a room that's only a green light. Ooh. It is a really great tech demo-esque type of demo because you're seeing, okay, here are all the different lighting examples you can see. And I guess the story of it is that you're walking around, you eventually open a door, and the hag, which is like this big,
definitely
scary monster, then she'll start to chase you. So again, this is like the modern Resident Evil. There's a big scary monster that's chasing you type of aesthetic. Then you got to go to a room to hide. Then I progressed a little bit more, and then the hag was chasing me again, and the demo ended. So mostly 17 minutes of kind of walking around and finding keys, typical Resident Evil stuff. But I mostly wanted to play it. So I can't really tell you, what's the big new gameplay innovation? Because I was here for the technical aspects. I wanted to see how does it run on Switch 2, and it ran as perfect as you could, possibly imagine. It was 60 FPS. The lighting was incredible. The texture work, it looked great. But when you see the PS5 demo, you realize, okay, she's not as sweaty as she is on PS5. Like her sweat textures are not as glistening compared to PS5. So yeah, it's not one-to-one for PS5, but it is one of those examples where if you weren't looking side by side, you would think, man, this looks like PS5 quality, or at least kind of above PS4 quality.
Right.
So Resident Evil 9, this was definitely, I would say, the most impressive game technically I played at TGS. And this was the one I wanted to play. And so it makes me super excited for future games on Switch 2. And Capcom has supported Switch 2. Like Kunitsugami is on there, and also Street Fighter 6.
Oh, yeah.
And Monster Hunter Stories 3, which I'll get into as well. But yeah, this was the new benchmark for third-party games. And it makes me think like, okay, if this runs on Switch 2, I feel like every game could possibly run on Switch 2, which is not true, but it makes me feel that way, which is a good feeling to have.
So when you played it, you mentioned it felt good, like no slowdown, nothing.
No slowdown at all. Resident Evil 9, you were in first person and you are kind of just, moving slowly. You're walking. You can sprint, but even sprint is not super speedy. Right. So it's not like there's a huge action scene. The hag is there and you do get attacked by the hag, but the actions per second are not as intense as another game.
Gotcha.
It ran completely smoothly. It looked beautiful. This is exactly what you want from the Switch 2 version of Resident Evil 9. Ironically, I'm not going to buy Resident Evil 9 on Switch 2. I'm not going to play this game ever again because it's just too scary. But if you are this, even during the demo, I was getting freaked out. I'm like, this is too much. But if you are that type of person and you want to play RE9 on Switch 2, I think you will be very, very pleased.
Gotcha.
All right, I have more Capcom stuff, but I want to hear a bit more from you. What's another game you played at TGS that really caught your attention?
Oh, so one that I didn't really see a lot of people talking about because it seemed to have its own little booth area. It was next to the Critical Reflex booth. I remember the trailer being released a few weeks ago and kind of turning heads. I was surprised to see it at TGS, and I was really happy I got the chance to play it. It's Densha Attack.
Oh, yes.
Which is I guess, extreme sports game based around Japanese subway trains, I guess. And it sounds absolutely absurd and sounds like it shouldn't work, but I'm glad I had the opportunity to play it because it felt great, honestly. It's super fast, super frantic, but super easy to control. You're moving at the speed of light, jumping from walls and grinding on multiple rails, but at any time, you never feel like you're not in control. And you always feel like you can do all these impossible things. It gives you more time to think, not necessarily like, how do I just play the game? Because it's a short demo. But it gives you more time to think of what cool things can I do? How can I show off? And how can I look a little cool to, bright, vivid colors, like games like that. And, Bomb Rush, Cyberpunk, Jet Set Radio. I guess I'm a sucker for that really colorful city aesthetic. The amount of games that have that are just not a lot at this point in time. You can probably count them on one hand. Having the opportunity to see something like that really blew me away. And something that I expected just to walk to and play for a bit and go, oh, that's nice, and then leave. I can't stop thinking about it, actually. I'm thinking about it now. I wish the game was out now. It's one of those situations on there.
Yeah, it had a really evocative trailer. I'm a little confused about the genre. Is it like an on-rails action game, or you said extreme sports, so it's like Tony Hawk, or what is the gameplay like?
Yes, it is all those things. Like at one moment you're grinding and you have a score on there to keep track of. And then the next moment you're dodging things flying at you and trying to avoid them. So it's constantly action. It is action in the purest word. There's always these things happening to you. And despite being on opposite edges of things you should do, the constant nature of it happening to you, it never feels jarring. It always just feels natural. You play for 3 minutes and your brain just accepts like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Now we're dodging missiles after we jumped off this wall, which just happens to be a subway train. I don't know how they tricked your brain into doing that, but I think just the smoothness of the game does that. I don't know how this is going to unfold in the full game and how this is going to play out, but just the small portion I played where everything's sort of tossed at you felt nice and it felt fun at the end of the day. So it's funny that you asked, like, what is it? Because I was the same thing. It literally is all those things that they show. The trailer did not lie. So.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. And speaking of the Critical Reflex booth, I'm surprised I didn't see Densha Attack because I wanted to play that, but I didn't know where it was. Ironically, it was next to a different game I played. And that game is Tanuki Palms Summer. Which is a game I've been looking forward to for a long time. It's from Dinky Works. And some of the people, they worked at Chuhai Labs in Kyoto. They made Curse to Golf. They broke off and made this new game, which is a game where you are, again, this is also another similar to Densha Attack. It is a mix of genres I didn't expect because the pitch of the game is that, okay, you are a tanuki delivering mail in like an idyllic Japanese town. So I assumed it is kind of like a quirky kind of adventure game where you are just going around and delivering mail. But there's a lot to it that I didn't expect. For one, you can do a lot of BMX stunts. There's a trick system in the game, which I didn't expect at all. The world is laid out almost like a Tony Hawk-esque land. There's ramps everywhere. There's rails you can grind.
Oh, nice.
And there's a trick system. I don't know exactly what the points do, like if you get anything for the points or if they're just for fun. But there is a point system where you can do backflips and front flips and grind and everything like that. Even if there's no point to it, it's just really fun to do. The controls are really nice. They're a bit lighter than a Tony Hawk, which feels a bit heavy at times. And again, you don't wipe out if you crash, so you don't have to slowly crawl to your bike or anything. It is like a very just casual, fun thing implemented into the game. But you are delivering packages, and it's just a really interesting mix of genres because when you get the packages from the post office, you go into like a Tetris mini game or like a backpack or Resident Evil 4-esque backpack arrangement mini game where, okay, all the packages are different shapes and you got to put them in your bag. One is like a Z shape, one is like an L shape, and you got to put all of them into the section correctly. So that's, again, this game has a ton of unexpected genre mixes. I had no idea were even in the game. And there's also a sumo game where you balance your stamina and attack the sumo wrestler. In this one demo, there's Tony Hawk BMX stunts, typical adventure gameplay where you're exploring the town. There's a sumo mini game. There's a backpack arranging mini game. So this game has a lot more to it than I expected. It has a great like cel-shaded aesthetic, a lot of charm. So this is something I'm really looking forward to. It's coming to Steam, so hopefully it will also come to the consoles as well. But Tanuki Palm Summer, definitely put it on your radar. And it also has the best piece of TGS swag I got was maybe you've seen this before because apparently
I know what you're going to mention.
It's like the Tanuki's hat, which is like this postman's hat, and it's like a life-sized postman's hat that you can just wear. And so I had that here, and yeah, it's just a really crazy thing they were handing out.
I was able to play this game at Bit Summit. And I had the chance to play it at Bit Summit. And I remember walking away from it thinking, I didn't know what to think. I just saw, when I first saw the design, it's like a Tanuki on a bike. I'm like, was it just slice of life, deliver packages type thing? Like you mentioned, the puzzle aspects of the trick system. And there's a big variety. It's another amalgamation of different types, but it just fits in a very cutesy aesthetic. I walked away really impressed playing it. I'm lucky that I know some of the people working on that game and they're very passionate about it. They care a lot about wanting to make something fun for everybody to play, but still lighthearted in nature. I can't wait to see how this grows a little bit farther. And like you said, I can't wait to get my hands on it either.
Yeah, this is one of those games where you see it and you're like, I hope this is good because the idea is so genius. And you're like, man, I hope they nailed it. And so far, they've definitely done so. So yeah, really looking forward to it. So I guess let's go back to you. Was there another demo or anything that you played that you really want to call out?
Yeah, it was in the indie game section or from Germany. And I don't think this game is going to come out. And I'll explain why in a second. Like, if you weren't here, you probably missed it. I didn't believe it until I played it, but it was called PVKK. They had a control setup for it. It's like this thing, you control this giant war machine, but the actual controller looks like the console of a giant tank war machine. They had the entire layout in front of you. There was no controller. You basically had to pilot this thing as if you were just piloting a giant machine. There were switches, there were levers, there was almost like a metallic steering wheel, like where you have to really crank it to turn. and to fire and move around. I had so much fun playing that game, but you play it with a tinge of sadness. This is such an incredible gameplay experience. This is why we play games, but unfortunately, due to the nature of the size of this controller, and I have to emphasize, think about a typical, 30-inch wide TV, and it's probably bigger than that, actually. It was an entire console layout. I definitely had a lot of fun playing that. I almost hesitated to bring it up because without pictures or without talking about it, it sounds like I'm crazy, like I'm insane. The closest equivalent I could think of is back in the day, the original Xbox had Steel Battalion.
Yes.
The mech game had a giant controller. The controller's bigger than that.
Oh, wow.
There's even more, like built-in screens you have to control and stuff like that. So it definitely brought that back. And I understand the logistics of you probably can't make this game in this controller, but if they were crazy enough to do it, I would probably break down and buy it. Honestly, it was such a fun experience.
Is it something you think they could sell, or is it just too big to possibly sell at all?
The thing is, though, everything is tied to the controller. My first thought is, well, you could just take this game and put it on Steam or something like that. But there are so many button commands and so many things you have to do that are tied to the different functions of the controller that they made for it. I don't know how you would fit that all on like a typical controller or even a keyboard. And feel like even if they did, a lot of the experience would be diminished. It's not just a game. It is an experience. It is you desperately fumbling and hitting buttons and trying to read the instructions while things are happening. I feel like that would just be missed on a more conventional or normal controller that we have right now. Because was the game itself fun? Like, absolutely. But everything was tied to that experience. And I feel like I can't not do that. It's like when you see a movie that was made for IMAX, you can watch it on your phone. And is it the same movie? Yes. But does it feel the same? And does it still evoke the same responses when you saw it on an optimal format? Unfortunately, no.
TGS is great because you never know what you're going to find. I have seen games like this where the control scheme is just so particular or so gimmicky that maybe this was just some sort of exercise where they got some sort of funding to make it and they're just like, okay, let's go for it. But I'm really curious to see. I'll put that on my radar for sure. I can see some people getting really into that game if they get it in their hands somehow.
Yeah, somebody out there might make their own controller, for the love of the game, right?
All right, I guess before we move on, I want to wrap up the Capcom booth because, again, they had 4 heavy hitters. We talked about RE9, and I also played Monster Hunter Stories 3, which is, again, like the Resident Evil 9, there was like a PS5 line and a Nintendo Switch 2 line. I was a big fan of Stories 2. It's a great RPG, and the gimmick of this game is that it is sort of like Monster Hunter Pokemon, where you fight alongside a monster instead of fighting them. It is like a turn-based JRPG battle system. The big new things here is that it is more of an open world instead of open zones, and the combat system is also more complex. Ironically, they had amiibos there, and these amiibos were not announced previously. They debuted via the Monster Hunter Story 3 booth at TGS, and people took pictures and were like, hey, there are new amiibos. And hours after I saw it on Friday, Capcom announced, oh, we have amiibos, even though people have already seen them and taking pictures of them. So again, that's another fun thing. You never know what you're going to see at TGS. There's announcements of unannounced things just randomly on the show floor. I waited maybe 15 minutes to get into the demo, which is great. But the demo was a 40-minute demo. When the woman said it in Japanese, I thought, did I mishear her? Did I make a mistake? There's no way this is a 40-minute trial demo. But it was. You can play Monster Hunter Stories 3 for 40 minutes.
Wow.
And when I went there, I'm like, I'm not going to play for 40 minutes. I'm not going to spend my precious TGS time doing this. But I did play it for 40 minutes because it was that fun. It was really that fun. Although, honestly, they could just chop off the first 20 minutes of the demo and it would still be good. You don't need the 40-minute demo. And again, I don't want to complain, but this was a demo where you stand up for 40 minutes. Let's get some chairs in here, Capcom. I also had to stand up for the Resident Evil and Onimusha demos. There's no chairs for any of those demos. So I don't know what's going on at Capcom. They can make these $1 million games, but they can't buy a few chairs.
The chairs will put them over budget.
yeah, that's the breaking point. But yeah, I feel like Capcom is making a big push for 3 because the new things they added seem substantial. Like the open world exploration is much deeper than it was in Stories 2. Now you can really quickly switch the monsters. So, some monsters can fly, some can climb. So you got to think about, okay, which monster do I need to use? But you can swap between them so quickly. And it is really fun. Okay, I'm on this dragon flying across this idyllic landscape. That's just inherently really fun. And it's 60 frames per second on Switch 2, which is what you want. There is some pop in for the textures, but that's okay as long as it's 60 frames per second. And the battle system, they've added a bit more complexity and options because the battle system of the original Stories games is very rock, paper, scissors-esque. You have red, green, blue. And if they do a blue attack, you want to do a green attack. If they have a red attack, you want to do a blue attack. Here, they've added a bit more complexity to it where, okay, there's like a stagger system. They call it like Wyvern Soul or something, where you do need to think about, okay, do I need to attack? Do I need to whittle that down or not? The really great thing about the battle system is that it feels like a very streamlined version of a Monster Hunter fight, where you need to think about, okay, where should I target on the enemy? For example, I fought the Paolumu, which if you don't know Monster Hunter fans, it's like this big bat.
Right.
And then his attack is like he sucks in a lot of air and he has this big bubbly neck and then he spits out an attack. So you can pick, okay, I want to attack the neck and I need to attack it with a piercing weapon. And also I want to attack it with the right color attack. So you do have to think about the different parts of your attack when you are picking it. So it's not just like, okay, I got to do the water attack on the fire Pokemon. It's more complex than that. And they've added a bit more complexity in there as well, which is what I kind of want to see from the battle system. Monster Hunter Stories 3, very impressed by it. It definitely feels like Capcom is like, okay, it's selling well enough, but we want to bring it to more people. Again, the protagonist is not a kid anymore. They're a bit older. They're an adult. The protagonist can talk this time around. They're not a silent protagonist. So it feels like Capcom is trying to make it a bit more, not super serious because it is still funny and it has this anime cel-shaded aesthetic, but they want to expand their audience a bit more to people who maybe they looked at Monster Hunter Stories 2 and they're like, that's Pokemon, that's kiddie, that's for kids. They want to try to maybe expand it a bit more. So Monster Hunter Stories 3, definitely put it on your radar if you are a JRPG fan, because even though it seems like it's a spin-off of Monster Hunter, this is not Clair Obscur, this is not Metaphor, this is not Dragon Quest. I don't need to think about this. If you are a JRPG fan, you should definitely keep an eye on it. So Kyle, were there any other games that you played that you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think of ones that just really stuck out besides the ones that I mentioned on there. I think the ones we talked about, they're the ones I really can't stop thinking about. I played a few other games. I played Battlefield. They split the booth up between single player and multiplayer. However, as everybody can guess, the multiplayer was the one that went instantly and was, done for the entire day. So single player was the one left, but I wanted it for the dog tag on there and the item that you would get in game. The single player was not bad, actually. It felt very much like those type of single player games do. Like it's very much a lot of explosions happening. You are on rails for a period of time where all you can do is shoot, and then you gain control of your character and you're running around shooting. The chaos felt very grounded, and I know there's a rivalry between Call of Duty and Battlefield. I would say compared to the last few campaigns in Call of Duty, this actually felt more like Call of Duty, which is ironic, because Call of Duty seems to be moving in a different direction, and Battlefield keeps trying to capture those people who aren't happy with that direction. I definitely noticed that. I don't know if this is just because I appeared to be playing on a PS5. Some of the textures on the characters were not that great. It felt like it didn't load in yet. I don't know how else to describe it. Like it's like some of the faces didn't look as detailed as other things on there.
Oh, okay.
And again, it's a betas or like a build here, so who knows? I noticed with the AI enemies, a lot of them appeared not very smart. I saw a lot of enemies running in place, caught behind a door or caught behind debris. Sometimes they would look really aggressive and look really cool, but other times they would just stand there. So again, it sounds harsh. I enjoy that series and I'm happy that 6 is back. The single player didn't seem bad at all, but maybe it wasn't the highlight. But overall, the booth and everything like that was great.
Yeah, talk about the booth, because that was the thing that really stuck out. That was maybe one of the more impressive booths at TGS. So can you describe what did the Battlefield 6 booth look like?
So there were a few booths that stuck out with me. We talked about Ananta earlier, but this is definitely one of the other ones. And it was just a giant double-sided booth. And on one side, there was like a row upon row of PCs where, you could play the multiplayer at, and a giant screen behind them, if I remember correctly. And on the side, there's like a giant model tank just crashing through the wall, and propaganda-looking posters of the different combat classes you have in there. And on the other side of the wall, it's just a row of PS5s and monitors to play single player in. It's very loud, very bombastic. You hear the explosions and gunshots happening there. It's impossible to miss. Some booths are really hard to find, even some of the bigger ones, because got lost among all the other bright flashing booths. But that was one that when I first came, I actually used it to sort of just position me to meet people. I'm like, just meet by the battlefield booth. Like you literally can't miss, you can't miss the thing. But in a year of just big, gigantic booths, like that was definitely has to be like probably one of the biggest ones there, top 5 for sure.
It has almost a life-size helicopter just above the booth.
Oh, I forgot about the helicopter. Yeah. I was enamored with the tank.
Yeah, the tank crushing through the stage can distract you from the helicopter. But it was a really impressive booth. You never know what booth is going to be crazy because Battlefield FPSs are popular in Japan, but of course they're not as popular as, Mario Kart or Pokemon, but it definitely has quite a big audience. So you wouldn't expect at TGS to see this type of booth, but the audience is there for it.
I noticed that previous TGS too as well. Like I was really surprised to see a giant booth for certain games. I thought there was a very tiny audience for it, but yes, it exists. Just the amount of people I saw at Battlefield this year, I was very surprised. It was always full, always people wanting to play it. So I don't know if it's just the booth size or if there's thousands of Battlefield fans that exist in Japan, but I'm sure if EA walked by and saw their packed booth, they'd be very happy with the results.
The next game I played, the first game I wanted to play, but I played it second or third. It was Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, the new Zelda Warriors game from Koei Tecmo. I eventually did find the Koei Tecmo booth. And fortunately, I maybe only waited about 10 minutes to play. They do have the special edition in a box there as well. So again, like the Capcom Amiibo thing, you never really know what you're going to find just in the line. So it was really cool to see the special edition. And I think the demo felt pretty short. Maybe it was just too fun that time flew by, but it was maybe 10 or 15 minutes. If you've ever played a Warriors game, it is like that, but there is a Zelda twist to it. You can play as Zelda, you can play as Rauru, and you can play as Minoru, the characters from Tears of the Kingdom. The stage was that you were in the depths and you were fighting mostly, I forget the name, the baby Froxes. The Frox is the big one, the big frog, but you fight a lot of the baby ones. And the boss battle is the big frog. This is a Zelda Musou game. You press Y and you press X and you do these crazy combo attacks. And you can also summon some Zonai devices from the game. So you can get this big flamethrower. So it is really funny to see Zelda walking around with the flamethrower. Something that she doesn't really get to do a lot in the main games. I really like the Minoru's attacks because she is like the engineer in the game. And of course, Tears of the Kingdom is all about putting different parts together. A lot of her combo attacks, she can summon the constructs, which are like the enemies from Tears of the Kingdom made out of green Zonite. She can also summon all these like crazy machines that look like something you could build from the game. She summoned like this giant, almost like a tank that had these spiked wheels on it during one of her combo attacks, which looked absolutely awesome. She also attacks just by like throwing wheels at people. She can ride one of the wheels and throw them out as well. So if you are a big Tears of the Kingdom fan, there's a ton of fan service here in terms of, oh, I never even thought about how I could use that item in Tears of the Kingdom in this new game. It's a great implementation of Zelda. And again, just the sound effects from Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, just put those in any game and the game is automatically better. Those sound effects are just iconic to me. This ran at 60 FPS and I did get to play it docked. So it looked really great docked. I didn't notice any frame drops. I want to say in the past Hyrule Warriors games, if they weren't just a stable 30 FPS, they probably had frame drops. I just have to imagine a Musou game on Switch 1 had to have had frame drops at some point. But here was totally smooth. And this is kind of what you want from a Warriors game. You want it to be smooth. You want to see a ton of enemies. You want these cool attacks. And this game definitely has that. So I'm not really a Warriors guy, but I was quite impressed by what I played from Hyrule Warriors here. Are you a Warriors guy at all?
I played the Dynasty Warriors 3 for PS2, which ironically, like they're remaking that as well. So that was cool to see. But also, in addition to that, I played the original Hyrule Warriors for the Wii U of all things. Back in the day, I remember buying that game and just really enjoying it and really shocked at how much content was available to play. And two other ones. I played the Gundam one. I don't even remember the title, but it was Dynasty Warriors with the Gundam skin. I remember playing that. And I played one of the Pirate Warriors games. I believe it was the third one. They're just games that feel good. It's like taking a sip of tea after a long, hard day of work. It just feels good to play. You feel your stress melt away when you play them.
And I think, ironically, I'm not a huge Warriors fan. And again, it is kind of ironic that a lot of the big games I played were games I'm not really that interested in. Like Resident Evil 9 and Hyrule Warriors. Those are not my favorite genres, like survival horror and Musou. But I wanted to see how they performed on Switch 2. That was my main mission. They both exceeded my expectations in terms of how they look and play on Switch 2. Monster Hunter Stories 3 as well. It ran perfectly on Switch 2. So that's what I was really checking for. I have two more games before we talk about boosts and some other just random stuff. I also played Ninja Gaiden 4, which I mentioned. I don't remember what time I got my timed entry ticket. Maybe around lunchtime, but my timed entry ticket was for 3:20. So like near the end of TGS. So I had to wait quite a few hours before I could even get into Ninja Gaiden 4. Oh, also like with Onimusha, they said like, oh, we're going to check your ID
That was funny
before
when
you
they
let
did
you in
that.
here.
That made me laugh. They said that.
Yeah, so they checked my ID for Onimusha and Ninja Gaiden 4. And Ninja Gaiden 4, this is from Koei Tecmo, which, this was just like right around behind Hyrule Warriors. This actually comes out next month, so one of the more recent releases. I would call it maybe the opposite of Onimusha, where Onimusha is very kind of deliberate, and Onimusha is not slow, but it's slower paced, I would say. This is like, for example, in Onimusha, one of the major gameplay mechanics is that you can do like this finisher attack where you stab a guy and then you slice them in half. In Ninja Gaiden 4, that mechanic is here, but instead of like slowly slicing them in half, it feels like you were like ripping them in half with your bare hands, and it takes like a half second to do this. So it feels like the opposite. It is a very opposite gameplay philosophy of Onimusha 4. It's incredibly fast because you can slice through enemies really quickly, and it's so gory. They're basically exploding. Like they turn into blood explosions once you slice through them. And the boss, it was about maybe a 20-minute demo, and 5 minutes was attacking enemies, and then 15 minutes was just fighting this boss. And this boss was just impossible. I did not beat the boss, and the people next to me, they also did not beat the boss. I was wondering, is there something I'm doing? What did I not understand? I looked to the left, he's stuck on the boss. I looked to the right, he's stuck on the boss. I did not see anyone beat this boss. And again, it is one of those things where maybe you could beat it if you know the gameplay mechanics a bit more deeply. But again, you're kind of just thrown into the demo and you're fighting these kind of jobber enemies. Okay, I know this button is the attack button, and I know this button is the jump button, but I don't really know the strategy, and I don't know when should I parry and dive and all this other stuff. And so the boss completely destroyed me. And what was ironic is that I got it down to like half health. I figured out, okay, when should I dodge? I figured out how to kind of string together some combos. And then I finally got the boss down to 0 health. And then once I did that, it grew another health bar. It was a phase change, but it showed the health bar was to 0. And then it did like this animation where it does a phase change and another health bar just pops up. So it just has another health bar. I thought, man, I worked so hard to get it down to 0. And then it just had a different health bar that it just spawned out of nowhere. Maybe somewhere on the UI, it says it has 2 health bars, but I couldn't believe it. It just
I'm
spawned
out.
a completely new health bar that I did not deplete, but I think this game is really just for action sickos. If you are just a crazy action guy and you want this sort of really intense combat, then this game is for you. I think this is the game that Ninja Gaiden hardcores want. They want some sort of crazy action game that is brutally difficult. But yeah, I'm a bit more interested in Onimusha. That's a bit more manageable than Ninja Gaiden 4. So it is interesting to see that, okay, they revived Ninja Gaiden and Onimusha. They're back. They're both like Japan. I guess one is a samurai, one is a ninja, which are very different philosophies in terms of gameplay. But it is interesting to see what they're leaning into. Capcom is leaning into, okay, this is more deliberate and parry focused. Koei Tecmo is leaning into, this is like an insane high-fast, or this is an insane high-speed, high-octane action game. So it is really cool to see these two very different
It's funny that you mentioned that because that was one of the games I really wanted to play but couldn't get to. I'm actually a huge Ninja Gaiden fan, so I'm a bit sad I couldn't get hands on it, but I guess luckily it comes out soon. From how you described it, it sounds good because from what I remember, this Ninja Gaiden's made by a different team. Like, it's not made by the core, like, Koei Tecmo team. It's made by Platinum. Just the biggest worry that people had with it is that Ninja Gaiden is exactly how you described it. It's very much like, it's very much aggression. It's very much, it's not, like you said, it's the opposite of what Onimusha was. You don't have time to sit back and think. You have to keep constantly pushing and moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour. Yeah. And a lot of people were a bit concerned when Platinum did it because Platinum, they made Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. And they're great action games, but they play very different than Ninja Gaiden. They either have a core mechanic that slows it down a bit, or it feels like it relies a lot on parrying and dodging. And from the way you described it, it makes me kind of happy, actually, despite being really difficult, because that sounds exactly like how Ninja Gaiden should play. So I'm even more disappointed that I didn't get the chance to play it.
Oh, okay. This game is not for me, but I think the Ninja Gaiden fans would like it because it is insanely quick. It is very violent and gory, and you have a lot of combat options. It's tough. I wonder if this is the first boss in the game or not. If it is, it might filter a lot of people who are maybe jumping into Ninja Gaiden, but I think for hardcores, they're going to be excited. I think Team Ninja is still helping, but maybe Platinum is doing the bulk of the work. Also, I got one of the cooler TGS swags from the Ninja Gaiden 4 booth. They gave me these pin badges of Ryu Hayabusa and also the new character. And they look really nice and really high quality.
Oh, nice.
It is something that you could easily slap on your backpack. This was a really cool swag that I got. I wanted to mention Hyrule Warriors, going back to Koei Tecmo. This is also from a new developer. It's not from Omega Force, who normally does the Muso games. They have the very generic name of AAA Game Studio. That's the studio that is developing Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. So yeah, it's interesting to see that Koei Tecmo is kind of leaning on these different developers or these brand new development companies.
I'm glad to see them coming back and being handled very well. That's always a worry when something comes back after a while. Is it going to live up to the legacy of the original? Is it going to respect the legacy of the original? Everything that I've seen and played so far sounds like it is, and I think that's just great.
Yeah. And I have one more game before we talk about boosts and wrap up, because, yeah, we've been going quite along. But again, this is the biggest gaming event in Japan, maybe. Yeah. And the last one was, again, some of these games, a lot of them, my first half was like, okay, Switch 2 games. I want to play those. Resident Evil 9, Switch 2. Hyrule Warriors, Switch 2. Stories 3, Switch 2. But some games are not coming to Switch 2 yet. I feel like a lot of these games could. Like Onimusha, I am wondering, could that come to Switch 2? I think maybe. Ninja Gaiden 4, again, I think possible for Switch 2. And this game as well, I think we'll probably get a Switch 2 version maybe one day, but Big Papa PlayStation is publishing it. And that is Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls from Arc System Works. And again, this is another TGS hack. If there is a publisher and developer booth, check both, because they might have both those games there. PlayStation had a big booth. They had Neo, they had Ghost of Yotei, and they had Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, which is being published by PlayStation. And I wanted to play that, so I went to the PlayStation booth. And they're like, oh, timed entry tickets, they're done. So I'm like, man, I guess I won't get to play Tokon Fighting Souls. But Arc System Works, they have a booth, the developer of the game. And I went there and they're like, okay, yeah, 10-minute wait, and then you can play Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls. So I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird, where if you go to PlayStation, there's no way you can play it. But if you just go to Arc System Works, just line up and you can play it. And the Arc Sys booth was not that big and not that busy, but they had some big games that I wanted to play, like Fighting Souls. I only waited maybe 10 minutes. Since it's a fighting game, they pair you up if you're by yourself.
Oh, wow.
So you just play like another random person in line. I kind of wanted to play the computer because I don't want some guy to just crush me. And this guy, he looked a bit younger than I am. He looked like maybe he was a college age student or something. And I thought, okay, he's going to crush me. But actually beat him pretty badly, to be honest. And I don't want to brag. Of course, I've been playing fighting games for a long time, but I'm not good at them. But I think just from inherent fighting game knowledge, I had the upper hand on him. And again, this sounds like I'm bragging, but I literally had to throw some rounds so it's a bit more even. Because I didn't want to crush him, because that's not fun. If you waited for this demo, it's a game you're looking forward to, and some random guy just completely dominates you. I didn't want to do that. But we played 2 sets, and I did win both of them. Within one set, it's 1-3. I won the first one 3-2, and then I won the second one 3-2. So I didn't feel super bad, but I should have thrown the last round, so it's 1-1. I feel a little bad about that. But going back to the gameplay, yeah, this is Arc System Works' take on Marvel vs. Capcom. It does feel Marvel vs. Capcom-y, but yeah, it is like this weird middle ground. It feels different enough from Marvel vs. Capcom, but I don't want to say that, it feels like another random Arc System Works games like Dragon Ball FighterZ. I just wish I knew more about it's hard to describe, because it doesn't feel like a clone, but it doesn't also feel like, okay, what are they doing that's different? That is the X factor that really separates it from Marvel vs. Capcom, because you have 3 like team members that you can tag in, but it definitely feels less tag focused, where you're like swapping in characters constantly. I didn't know what is the tag in button, because there's like an assist button and you can bring somebody in to attack, but I didn't know how to switch to that character. Sometimes a pop-up would appear and it would say switch with a question mark, and then you press X to switch. But even though I pressed it, it wasn't switching in. So I don't know if there's a secret other button that you need to switch in. So the first round, I picked Spider-Man as my main guy, and I never was able to swap to a different character. I can only call them in to come in and do an attack. And then sometimes there's like combo attack that you can do, like, more than one person shows up as well. I think I was just a little confused about the controls, even though they make you scan the QR code to read the controls. But I was like, I'll just learn when I'm playing. And I kind of regret that because I didn't
Right.
know a lot of the finer details of it. But there's like quick dash, quick assist. There's like a special attack button, which is kind of fun because that's just like your big super attack. So it is like an Arc System Works game where there are kind of auto combos. If you just press the light attack button 3 times, you will do like a combo and you can mix and match as well. So it looks really awesome to play because you're just constantly doing combos. If you just press buttons, something cool will happen. The animations look great, and I really like the mechanic where you knock them down to a different part of the stage. You're constantly going back and forth between different parts of the stages that look really different from each other. I had fun playing it, but this is a game where I feel bad because I don't know in detail about the gameplay mechanics in terms of, what's different from, how is it different from Marvel vs. Capcom? It definitely feels less swapping character focused than Marvel vs. Capcom is. It feels more like the other characters are there to help you do assist and help you do combo attacks, and less, okay, I'm swapping in Storm and I'm swapping in whoever. But, and I would say like the characters, even though they're similar, their attacks are very different from each other. Like Spider-Man, he doesn't feel like Spider-Man from Marvel vs. Capcom. His attacks are totally different. He throws out like these gadgets. He throws out like a bomb and all this other weird stuff like that as well. Yeah, the Spider-Man, his pose is different from Marvel vs. Capcom, so it doesn't feel like if you know how to play MVC Spider-Man, you know how to play Arxis Spider-Man. It's very different from each other. This is a game where I wish I knew more in detail about what they're trying to accomplish with Tokon Fighting Souls, because I want to dig into, okay, what are they doing? I know what they're doing different, but I'm trying to figure out how do they want you to play it? Because of course, when you're playing it, you kind of go into MVC brain and you're like, okay, I'm going to swap in Storm and then I'm going to do the super combo assist attack and do the level 3 special. You kind of have to rewire your brain.
Did it feel like did it feel like fast and fluid?
Oh yeah. It's a very fast paced game. No frame rate dips or anything. I was playing on PS5, so you hope that it would be consistent. But I kind of wonder like, is the MVC audience going to move over to this game, or will they be mad that it's so different? For the casual people who just want to play a Marvel fighting game, I think they will be excited, and also it's very weird because it's 4 versus 4, but there's only 8 characters that you can pick from. So it's like the first match was like Spider-Man versus Spider-Man. Of course. Because of course everyone wants to play a Spider-Man. And the second match was like he picked, I think was it Dr. Doom and I was a Miss Marvel. I think he was able to swap in a character. Maybe it's just me that I had no idea how to swap in characters, but the controls are a bit more complex than you would imagine. But yeah, I had a lot of fun playing it, even though I was very confused about it most of the time. But you know, it's a Marvel fighting game. It's from a prominent developer, so it is something that people should be
when I first
very aware
remember,
of.
because everybody always says like, "Oh, Marvel vs. Capcom 4," you know, and this came out, it was like, you know what, close enough.
Yeah,
as close as we're gonna get.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely not MVC4, but not in a bad way. I think it is different enough where, okay, they are trying something different from MVC, but I haven't quite figured out what is the big thing they want to lean into, or how am I supposed to play this game, or how do they want me to play it? Because, you know, MVC came out 25 years ago. So if you played it as a kid, and if you've played it, you know, since then, Marvel vs. Capcom Collection came out, last year, and people were playing it for the first time. So a lot of people are just, their brain is wired to that. So you have to kind of like, okay, reprogram your brain.
I guess in a good way too. It's sort of maybe kind of a more even playing field, so you don't have veterans just come in who haven't played it since like the Dreamcast that just like stop everybody.
Right. So those are all the games I played. I want to talk more about the booth designs and just weird, fun stuff we saw. What booth would you say was the coolest looking?
There were so many larger than life booths this year. It was truly stunning. We talked about Anatana earlier. I felt like that's one that really sticks out, mainly because, like you said, the display there, when you move into the demo area to play the game, they have it set up like a Japanese like subway station. You know, for those who don't know, it really looks like, you're walking into a subway station and the city art is everywhere. So that definitely sticks out. I feel like every year Konami always brings a gigantic booth, and the Silent Hill portion of that booth was really good. If you came at certain times, there were performers dressed up as zombies or the creatures. So I haven't played F yet, but the creatures from that game just sort of creepily standing there and moving around. So that was interesting to see. The Sega booth, we haven't talked about that one yet, but the Sega booth was the closest thing I could think of to how that was set up was like a game show. There was like, it was a multi-tiered stage. the seats were set up so you actually had to like climb on the stage area. It literally looked like a contestant on a game show with a giant screen behind. To top it all off, they had this announcer there who was making announcements of all the games that were coming up. So whether they were doing like an interview with people on stage above everybody playing, or they just, going to showcase another game, they had an announcer. The weird thing is that the announcer was speaking in English. It wasn't a Japanese announcer. And it sounded like he was talking about like Football Manager, but he was hyping Football Manager up like it was the game of the year for all years. And he was getting super hype, the Prestige Simulator and stuff like that. I don't even play anything football, but this guy's got my attention out here. He's really hyping this up. So I think that was one as well. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the name of the game, but there was a giant booth where it looked like a temple almost, like a bridge you cross over, and there was like a traditional Chinese dance performance. And I don't know what it was for, but the area, I don't know what it
was. It right across from the Onimusha booth? Because I remember looking at that while I was waiting for Onimusha.
Yeah, and I was just looking over, and I'm just like, I don't know what it was for, but there was like a whole area where you had stations set up and people just standing around talking, and it was absolutely insane. And we mentioned earlier the Resident Evil booth, that screen as you're waiting in line. I might be forgetting some, but those are the ones I remember the most and the ones that really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I remember seeing that Chinese temple. Again, I don't know what game this is for either. I think a common trend is that a lot of Korean and Chinese developers, they have these extremely elaborate booths, but it is vague about what is their game and what are they doing. And sometimes you would just see like, it would just be this huge stage, tons of neon. There's like 30 girls there in cosplay or in some sort of skimpy outfit. And the name of the booth is called like G-Talk or like Game Unit. And I have no idea what is this for or who are you? These are very abundant at TGS. The push and pull between, okay, what developers are represented and who is shoved off in these random areas. Sometimes it feels a little bit unfair or it feels a bit, money talks at TGS. But some booth designs I want to get into. Capcom had a really awesome booth. The gigantic RE9 screen. Onimusha was a bit plain. It just had like a big banner, but you did get to see the gauntlets, the Onimusha gauntlets, which was really cool. Again, going back to Onimusha a little bit, one of the cool gameplay concepts is that the idea of Onimusha is that you have the Onimusha gauntlet that gives you superpowers. But also the boss battle, you fight another guy who has a gauntlet. So it is this cool, like good guy has a gauntlet, bad guy has a gauntlet, and they have both gauntlets there. You can check out Monster Hunter Stories 3. It had the amiibos and some Rathalos statues. And Pragmata, a game I wanted to play, but again, we couldn't get into. And that was like you got to pick, do you want to play Resident Evil or do you want to play Pragmata type of game? But they had like the girl, the android girl was there. The life-size android girl was there, so you could see her. So Capcom had, in terms of sheer size, they had a great booth. Square Enix, they had a really nice booth because Square Enix is weird this year because they don't have like a big game coming out this year in terms of like a big AAA release. Like they have Tactics. They have Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D coming out this year as well, which are, both those games I'm going to buy.
Right.
But those are quote unquote old games. And also a big thing that they had was Final Fantasy VII Remake on Switch 2, which I wanted to play, but then I completely forgot to check out by the time I went there. It was an 80-minute time limit or 80-minute line. So I'm like, oh man, I'm sorry, Tokyo Game Life listeners who want to hear about all the Switch 2 games, because I totally forgot. Again, that is also weird. It's like, oh, do I line up to play this 6-year-old game on Switch 2? Even though they don't have like a lot of big, quote unquote, like, big brand new games. And that is a trend again, where depending on the year, sometimes they have big games, but sometimes they don't. Capcom had 4 legit huge releases. But like Bandai Namco, it's like, we have Little Nightmares 3, which I'm sure is going to sell very well. But when you think of Bandai Namco, you don't really think of Little Nightmares 3. And so Square was also like, okay, guys, we have some remakes of old games. So we have a cool booth. You should come by and check it out. We have a fat chocobo that you can ride. And they had all these photo ops where you could ride the fat chocobo. You got to line up for maybe 30 minutes to ride that. They had like a Final Fantasy Tactics photo op area, which you didn't have to line up, but it was just like, okay, take a picture of Final Fantasy Tactics. And they also had, you could play Final Fantasy Tactics there. And the line for that was about 30 minutes. And I'm thinking like, this game comes out in 4 days. Like, why are you wasting your TGS time?
I was the same way with games. I'm like, I could wait to play this, or I could just wait, like in days or months.
Yeah. I really want to interview people who played also like Dragon Quest 1 and 2. That comes out in about a month. But the line for that was like 30 minutes. And Ninja Gaiden 4 also comes out in about a month, but that's a brand new game. I want to play that, get the feel about how they're going to revive Ninja Gaiden. DQ1 and 2, a game I'm really looking forward to, but I can wait to play it in a month. I don't need to spend my TGS time. Going back to Capcom once again, one other game they had was Mega Man Star Force Legacy Collection, which is a collection of the DS Mega Man games, the DS like RPG Mega Man games. The wait to play this collection was 90 minutes. And again, I just want to interview the people who waited 90 minutes to play this collection of DS games. I guess if you are just a huge Mega Man hardcore and you're really curious about how they're going to do this series justice, I can see it, but just like, that's a little baffling. Where should I wait to play RE9 or Onimusha or Pragmata?
Exactly.
Or should I play Mega Man Star Force on DS? There's something for everyone, I guess, is the point. Square had great photo ops. Namco, Little Nightmares, even though we were kind of joking about this is a strange game to show off, they did have a really impressive booth there. They had like a 3-story sized hand that came out of the booth.
Did you see the Code Vein 2 booth as well?
I saw it from far away.
It looked cool as well. It was nice to see these, I hate to say this, but maybe not as, like you said, heavy hitters like Little Nightmares get giant booths dedicated to them, though. That's something you don't really see too often, I think, at any show.
Yeah. And it was cool that in the Konami booth, Silent Hill, a much beloved franchise, but it is one that's been on the rocks for quite a while. So it was cool to see that Silent Hill is back. We've dedicated a big section of our booth to Silent Hill. And they also had a section for Momotaro Dentetsu, Japan-only train board game. This is something that has really blown up the past few years because this is one of Konami's biggest IPs. Just even in Japan, the first one on Switch sold over 4 million copies. That's only in Japan, which is insane. They had a sequel, which hasn't sold as much, but I think that's over 2 million only in Japan. And they announced a new one is coming out as well for Switch and Switch 2 this year. And that's a game that is probably under a lot of people's radar, but that's going to come out and sell like over 1 million copies, which is really funny to think about. That's maybe secretly Konami's biggest IP is Momotaro Dentetsu right now. Not Metal Gear, not Silent Hill. It's Momotaro Dentetsu or like the baseball game. And they had like, baseball section there. You could take a picture with a Otani standee if you want.
He's everywhere.
So, yeah. Yeah. Some other booths. Battlefield 6 had a really impressive booth. I want to get into I don't know how to describe it, like the girl gotcha game booth areas. Did you see the Nikkei booth at all?
I saw it, but I didn't have the chance to get any closer to it. It was just one of those, like, I saw it as I walked past, but it's impossible for it not to catch your attention.
Yeah. Okay, so the Nikkei listeners, it's like a gotcha game. You get these girls, they're all in skimpy outfits. That's the concept of the game. And at TGS, I felt like there's like 100 of these games that had this concept where girl in skimpy outfit is a gotcha game. From Japan, Korea, China, from all over the place. They had this, I would describe it as like a real life gotcha. You go up and you press a button, and on the stage behind glass are these girls in these cosplay outfits. And then one of the girls comes out from behind the glass and you can take a picture with them. So it's like you randomly select what girl comes out of this gotcha machine and they will come and take a picture with you. It was totally strange just to walk by and you see like these 6 girls in cosplay standing on top of this huge stage. And it's just like, oh, this is only something that you're going to see at TGS. Yeah. It's just
this is very much like I can't picture this being at any other event in the world outside of TGS.
Yeah. And I'm looking through my pictures now. I took pictures of all these booths. There's like something called Crimson and Inferno, and it has girls in cosplay, this dripping blood coming from it, these gigantic screens. I don't know what this game is, but it was there. Going back to the girl gotcha games, there was one, they had these gigantic multi-story screens of like these girls, again, in skimpy outfits. They're kind of dancing around. I feel like there's a lot of these games. I wrote it down. Merce, again, I don't know how to say this or pronounce it. And there's another one called like Chasing Kaleido Rider. They have a huge booth. And I'm just like, what are these games that have gigantic booths that I've never, ever heard of? They have all these cosplayers. And it's just like, again, I guess this is how they get your attention with these really elaborate, crazy neon signs and booths and cosplay girls. It's like, wow, they spent a lot of money here. So hopefully they can make this money back.
That's gotcha. That gotcha money goes a long way, I guess, right?
Yeah. Crimson Desert, they had a really cool booth as well. It was like this giant like stone temple. I saw people carrying these pillars, these stone pillars, and taking pictures with them. So I guess there was like a photo op where you could pick up a pillar. It was very strange. Level 5, again, sometimes I remember when I went there like maybe 2 years ago at TGS, they had a huge presence. They had like Inazuma 11. They had Deca Police, which I played in 2023, but it's not out yet. And it's coming out next year. And they had like Fantasy Life. This time, they didn't really have a whole lot. They have like, Layton is coming out next year. They had a backdrop of like the steampunk city. And I don't know if you could play Layton. There was lining up for something. Maybe you could play a Layton demo. It was a Layton.
I think you could, if I remember correctly. You could, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, they had something, but it is funny to see one year they have this huge booth, and the next year they're like, okay, our booth is not as big because we don't have as many games this time, which is kind of, again, Square Enix also kind of fell into that, where if you go during the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth year, they have these gigantic screens of Sephiroth and stuff like that. But then another year, they're just like, we got Dragon Quest Remake. And but they announced Dragon Quest VII Remake, and they had like the statues that they scanned into the game on display at the Square Enix booth. So that was really cool to see in person. Are there any places that you would say are the best photo ops at TGS? What were you taking pictures of?
The booths that I mentioned earlier were the ones I was taking multiple pictures of, like multiple angles of them, because in addition to just how big and bombastic they look, they're so large. So it's impossible to get everything in detail in one frame. Just, we mentioned earlier, like the Battlefield one, for example, and I was taking multiple pictures because it's just, there was so much detail that went into the whole design of that area, from the subway signs on there to the art, to the ticket station, to the statue, to everything like that, with multiple angles on, to the screen flashing all the information. It was truly impressive. And it's hard too, because like we mentioned in the beginning, it's busy. You feel bad if you're just standing there trying to get good pictures. So I was trying to snap it as quickly as possible. But those are the ones that I took the most pictures of. Those are the ones I walked away from impressed. Crimson Desert, you mentioned on there, that's another game that just seems to be the fantasy version of a Natsuno to me, because it's like The Witcher, Breath of the Wild, like Dark Souls all in one game. But, that had a crazy, gigantic booth as well. The Sega one, they had 2 specific photo ops, one with the cosplayers dressed up from the Like a Dragon series, one where it was just like Sonic characters, for the upcoming Sonic racing game. But like the center there, like it's like everybody who played, like you're put in the center. Nobody can not see you. You're up on these rows, it's glowing. There's this announcer screaming, and everybody's just looking at you. So like that one as well, I took a few pictures of. But overall, it just, I don't know if it was necessarily different than last year, but it just seemed so big and so well detailed this year. I was just thoroughly impressed by pretty much everybody that I walked past.
Yeah, and some photo ops I want to call out. There's a lot of good statues and things like that. Astrobot, there was a small Astrobot area where it had like, I don't want to say realistic, but closer than real than not. It did look like a robot, Astrobot. And there's also, Katamari.
I forgot about Katamari.
Coming out. Yeah, going back to the Namco booth, we were making fun like, Namco booth doesn't have a whole lot. Actually, it had more than I expected, or more than I remembered, because they had Little Nightmares 3, they had Code Vein, and then kind of in the back, he was kind of shoved off near the back wall, was the Katamari section. And they had all these Katamari cosplayers, and they were dancing. They had like a dance routine. It wasn't just they were walking around high-fiving. They had multiple of the cousins doing this dance routine in front of a giant Katamari. That was a really fun thing. I posted that on social media, and a lot of people liked that as well. They really enjoyed it. Sega had like a really cool, they always have some sort of crazy Sonic balloon. They had like the Sonic racing game, so they had this gigantic balloon of Sonic racing upside down. Sonic Shadow and Mega Man. He was not at the Capcom booth. You could only find Mega Man at the Sega booth, ironically. And the Like a Dragon cosplayers were really awesome. They had like a dozen characters from the game in front of like the Kamurocho gate. So that was a really good photo op as well.
There was just a mix of main characters and NPCs you run into there. So there was kind of a cool variety.
Yeah, and I guess I'll talk a little bit briefly about the indie games, or Hall 9 and 11, because in Makuhari Messe, Hall 1 through H is where all the main studios are. But there's a separated section called Hall 9 to 11, where it's mostly like merch, but also the indie games are also kind of just like shoved in here. How do you feel about the indie game representation, or how they're presented at TGS.
I feel like it was slightly better this year than before. I always felt like indie games is sort of just put into their, like, literally shoved into the corner, and I never really got represented properly when we're in an area that people would go to play them. So the fact that they kind of just out there a little bit more this year was slightly better. But in the grand scheme of things, I think the focus of TGS very much goes to just larger publishers and titles. And unfortunately, indie games are sort of just there. Even though the indie games that were there were great, I feel like TGS doesn't really pay them as much focus as other places do. Just keeping in the spirit of Japan, like Bit Summit, which happens in Kyoto, that's pretty much entirely indie game focused. It's multiple stories of the center just with indie games. Compared to that, I definitely felt a bit lacking. And then when you compare it to other recent ones like Gamescom, for example, which seemed to have a good balance of both, didn't quite have it this year. And I like that it's getting better, but I always feel like indie games sort of just don't get the full representation they deserve here. But the sign that it's slightly better than before, I hope, is a sign that they understand this and continue to make improvements, because some of them I really do feel like deserve the opportunity to shine right next to the other titles there as well.
Yeah, they have this program called Indie 80 where they hand select 80 indie titles to showcase at TGS. Some of them are on the main floors. Like we played Tanuki Palm Summer and Densha Attack. Those were at the Critical Reflex booth. So they were like smack dab in the middle between Capcom and Namco. But if you don't have a publisher, like Devolver Digital, they were in the main area as well. So if you have them as your publisher, they will put you there. But for a lot of indie games that maybe don't have publishers yet, you are kind of in like this row of other indie games. And even in Hall 9 to 11, you're not like the main event. You're like on the right side in the corner, and you got to go past the Kojima Productions merchandise t-shirt booth to get to the indie games. So I do kind of wish that all the Indie 80 games were on the main floor, and then just get that merch and accessories, and maybe you even put some like, okay, you're not a priority or you don't have a game type of company, put them there as well. Like I saw Google Play had like a main area, like who was going to the Google Play booth? I would much rather have like the
Exactly,
Indie 80 indies.
Right?
Swap those,
right,
swap
exactly,
those.
exactly.
Or just have a Gacha Grill section and put them all in that one spot. I just wish all the Indie 80 games were on the main floor somewhere. Also on the main floor, they have these like game schools, which is cool, I guess, but also, I don't know. I feel like priority should be made towards people who have games that they're trying to sell. They should have the main floor stage. Put merch and maybe the students in Hall 9 to 11. That's what I would do.
Yeah, it's just weird when you see everything passed off in the corner like that, and then, like you said, somebody like, I don't know, like Vitori gets, like a booth in the center there and stuff.
The good thing about Tokyo, at least, is that, especially recently, there are a lot of indie game events that are definitely growing a lot. There's Tokyo Indie Game Summit. There's Digital Games Expo. There's Tokyo Game Dungeon.
Yes.
So if you are an indie developer in Japan, you still have many options, but TGS is the big one. Hopefully in the future, there is a bit more attention paid to indie games. That would be the one thing I would want to see. So I guess that was Tokyo Game Show 2025. I guess, is there any closing statement you want to say, or how did you feel about this year?
If I had to do a closing statement, it's just that a lot of people who come here, they comment and they say this evokes feelings and the grandeur and spectacle of E3s, old E3s of the past, which no longer exist. For a period of time, I felt like, well, maybe E3 doesn't need to exist in this world. Maybe we don't have room for these big booths and these larger-than-life games here. And, Nintendo's going with their directs. We don't need that anymore. Maybe they're right. To see the amount of people who come here from just industry, not counting Public Day. I saw clips yesterday where people literally couldn't move. That's how many people came for Public Day. The spectacle is still there, and the need to see things big and loud is still there. I suppose you could argue all day whether it's worth it or not, but I think at the end of the day, people want that experience to see games and make them feel larger than life in a format where it just seems like a giant celebration. And I feel like that out of all the showcases, TGS is the one that just every year does it. I say that with a caveat, because as much as I enjoyed it, like we mentioned with indie titles, I feel like they can always do better. And I hope they do, and I'm sure they will. But it just, nothing else provides that. I guess this show represents how people see games in their mind. They are big, they are important, they are gigantic and large in life. And I think TGS personifies it very well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Even though there are some flaws or they can do things better, it is always like a spectacle to experience that I think you won't find anywhere else in the world. And yeah, I think my main takeaways are that, yeah, very impressed by all the Switch 2 games I played, especially the third-party ports. So I have a lot of confidence about the future of Switch 2 and how it can run games. And also, yeah, I definitely feel like Capcom, they are maybe the MVP. They had 4 really huge titles. I played 3 of them, really enjoyed them. The one I didn't play seemed popular and people liked it. And yeah, amazing boosts, some great merch. They could do better with indies, but overall, yeah, very pleased with Tokyo Game Show 2025. Always a lot of fun. So I'll definitely look forward to going back next year. And I guess for listeners, if you can get in on the business days somehow, I highly recommend it over the public days. So try to figure it out somehow.
Create your own podcast,
Yes.
create your own blog,
if you have,
and try to get in.
I guess for listeners, if you have some sort of media connection, try to use it and see if you can get in on the business days, because definitely worth it. But yes, that was Tokyo Game Show 2025. So Kyle, thank you so much for staying on for such a long time talking about TGS. Where can people find you?
Yeah, thank you for having me. You can find me on primarily Blue Sky, Instagram, and Twitch. I try to stream on Twitch regularly, usually a focus on older arcade titles and indie titles on there, because that's what I gel with the most. But otherwise, that, like I said, Blue Sky and Instagram is where I'm primarily at. So drop in, say hi, live in Tokyo, love living and working here, and would love to connect with other people as well.
Great. And the links to everything are in the podcast description. So listeners, check it out. Give them a follow for making history by being the first back-to-back guest. So Kyle, aka Mr. Knives, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on here, and here's to many more.
Today in the game section, we are looking at the hotly anticipated Hades 2 and a game literally nobody anticipated, Fire Emblem Shadows. Now, I know what you're thinking. What happened to Silksong? What about Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles? Where's Mario Galaxy? There are legitimately too many games coming out this holiday season, and as a bi-weekly podcast, there's going to be some games that get pushed aside or talked about a bit later than normal. Silksong update, I miraculously beat the game. My opinion hasn't changed too much from the past episode, so go listen to that. But overall, I had a great time with it, albeit it wouldn't hurt to be, say, 30% easier. Let's see if it gets into my top 5 for games of the year, so wait until that episode for more Silksong. Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, that game is just too important to be shoved in the middle of an episode, so I will have a guest on in the future to talk all about it. And Super Mario Galaxy plus Super Mario Galaxy 2, I mean, I've already played those games. Galaxy 1, I 100%ed again when 3D All-Stars came out. And Galaxy 2, I wouldn't mind going back and playing again, but it is hard to dedicate time to it when just so many new games are coming out. But if you've never played any of the Galaxy games, you should totally buy the Galaxy Collection. It's worth $70 if you 100% both. That's like 50 to 60 to 70 hours of content. I think if you've never played the Galaxy games and played both of them back to back, your head might explode from just the sheer quality of gameplay. But the games we're going to talk about this episode, let's start with Hades 2 from Supergiant Games. Like Silksong, another rare non-Japanese game featured on the podcast, but Silksong and Hades 2 are perhaps the 2 most anticipated indie games of all time, and their predecessors left a massive footprint on the Switch. Nintendo had no first-party releases for Switch 1 or 2 in September, but for a lot of Switch gamers, Silksong and Hades 2 are just as big as anything Nintendo could put out. This is the sequel to 2020's massive roguelite action hit, Hades, a game I absolutely adored on Switch. It was my number 2 game of the year, which is great considering my number 1 was Animal Crossing New Horizons, one of my favorite series and a game that helped keep my sanity intact in 2020. So to come even close to that is a pretty big honor. Needless to say, Hades 2 has been one of my most anticipated titles of the year. If you skipped out on the first Hades, it's an isometric action game where you clear rooms of enemies and then buff your character after each wave with the ultimate goal to topple the final boss. If you drill it down to that, it does sound like your pretty typical roguelite action game, but Hades separates itself by its incredible balance between abilities, the diversity of fun builds you can make, the vibrant art style, a great story anchored by fantastic, well-written performances, and an addictive meta progression. And the way it's structured is that yes, there is kind of an end to the game in terms of story, which sets itself apart from most roguelikes. Even after you beat the final boss, that is kind of just phase 1 of the story, and then to get to the true ending, you need to complete some other task. But if you're a gamer who just likes to play a game until the credits roll, Hades does a great job in balancing the infinite run element of roguelites with delivering a complete narrative for people who just want to experience that. Hades 2 doesn't change the fundamental gameplay or the hook of the game. It really does just throw more ingredients into the pot. Or cauldron, I guess, because you don't play as Zagreus, the son of Hades from the first game, but instead Melinoe, the daughter of Hades, who is a witch. And this is one of the biggest things I was looking forward to. How do they change the gameplay up between guy with a sword versus a witch? And they definitely add a lot of witchy elements that I wanted to see. A major change is that you now have a magic meter that is tied to another mechanic, the Omega attacks. These are moves you activate by charging your attack, special, or cast, and they aren't just more powerful versions of your base attack, but instead they are often completely new attacks. So compared to Hades, your moveset is basically doubled. This also leads into more build variety, as you can make builds that really buff up your magic meter and let you do Omega attacks more often. Also completely new is the cast action. In Hades 1, it was the Bloodstone, a slow-moving crystal you toss out, but this time it's an AoE circle that you place on the ground. It's great for both damage and managing enemies, and a big element of Hades is crowd control, so this is an incredibly useful addition to the game. You definitely have more options than ever when it comes to focusing on what you like to do. Maybe you have a build focusing on utilizing the most out of your Omega cast, or maybe you're fine with just focusing on your base attack, or maybe you like builds that let you debuff enemies the more you dash. The reason why Hades 1 was so great is that there are so many build varieties you can succeed with, and Hades 2 has even more options that are fun to experiment with. The gameplay pillar of fighting enemies, buffing, and then fighting a boss, thankfully they didn't mess it up. It feels just as good as it did in Hades 1, and the new abilities and weapons make it also feel like a really fresh experience. I will say though, I don't know if I like the weapons as much as in Hades 1. I've unlocked 5 of the 6 weapons so far, so not all of them, but the ranged weapons in Hades 1, those things were just really fun to use and they would tear up enemies. Here you start off with a staff, which is like the spear, and then you get a close-up knife and sickle, then a ranged weapon, which is fairly slow, then a big axe, which is kind of like the sword from the first game, and I just unlocked a skull, which is kind of like a gun that has ammo. I don't have an outright favorite so far, but I've had a lot of success with the witch's staff, which is like a spear. There is also a mechanic where you get more mats if you use a specific weapon each night, so the game does want you to experiment and try out different weapons. And speaking of that, one of the other major new mechanics for the game is that it has a much deeper crafting and mat gathering system. You use these to throw into the cauldron to unlock new incantations, which are permanent boosts to your character or some change in the overworld. These are also common rewards for just doing things in a run. I'm not quite sure about how I feel about this mechanic just yet. During a run, when you have to choose your next reward, sometimes it is just more currency for the meta progression, which I suppose is better in the long run as it helps you get permanently stronger, but during a run I would much rather have a new ability or upgrade I can get as opposed to something I can't use during the run. I think having the ashes and bones currencies based on missions within a run or based on your performance would have been better. I think the match system is the only thing that makes it seem a little bloated instead of giving me more of what I want. There is such a simplicity to the core gameplay that bogging it down with other stuff can hamper the experience, but in general, I still like going through and tearing up enemies night after night, hoping I can finally topple the final boss, which I have not done so yet. And the game also adds an alternate path, the Surface, which I ventured into a little bit, but it also has its own distinct gameplay systems. I'm really curious about how that area plays out. Like, do they just add another map into the game? Is this secretly Hades 2 and Hades 3? I still think I haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to a lot of the new mechanics. Like, I just unlocked familiars, so I can now bring a frog with me who helps out. And there's also a unique boon tied to Selene, the goddess of the moon, which has its own skill tree once you upgrade it, and that has an entire button on the controller dedicated just to this one boon. Also, there's a room I can't get into, Hypnos is still asleep. I do feel like I'm just getting started, despite having already uncovered a lot. And of course, I gotta give it up for the absolutely incredible art and visual design for the series. The vivid colors mixed with those deep, inky blacks, gods have never looked cooler. There are also a lot of new characters from Greek myths that show up here as well. Also, like Achilles from the first game, we now have Odysseus hanging out, and both of them are really just guys. I kinda like how just a capable guy is hanging out with the gods. Kronos, the main bad guy, is also a great take on the character, and he does have a bit of a Japanese-inspired flair, since his body with gold streaks is clearly inspired by kintsugi, the art of mending pottery with gold lacquer. In the future, you could totally do this type of game with a different pantheon. They could pull a God of War and do Norse Hades, or Japanese Hades, and Egyptian Hades. The next 20 years of Hades is really just ready to go. Not only does the art elevate the game, but also the incredible depth when it comes to the situational writing, something the first game was also known for. Each character has an unbelievable amount of dialogue. No one will say the same thing twice, ever. A lot of it is very situational too. If you get to Kronos and die, that's what everyone's going to be talking about. Even one-off remarks are so specific. You meet Arachne, who weaves a temporary armor for you in the first map. I picked the armor that gave me a green tunic, and she said, "Matches your eye, because I've got a green eye." The game is filled with tons of these interactions, which make dying A-okay. You kind of don't mind dying because you're going to have completely new interactions with a lot of the characters you quickly find interesting. Okay, random stuff I like. The fact that the color of your tunic changes when you get a buff from Arachne, that's the level of detail I want to see from Hades. The second level is also Oceanus, which is a cool steampunk / ocean liner deco style, and you fight the Sirens, who are an 80s girl rock band. And maybe my new favorite deity is Hephaestus, who is the god of craftsmanship, and he gives your weapons really unique buffs, which makes trying out different weapons more enticing. Also, I like that you have, a transparent skull arm. So, Hades 2, is it as good as Hades 1? Maybe a little too early to tell. It definitely is more Hades, and I didn't have any fundamental problem with the first game that I wanted fixed here. But there are some things I do think Hades 1 does better. Zagreus is more of an interesting character so far, since his major conflict is with his dad, who you see in the main hub after each round. Kronos is Melinoe's grandfather, but so far the tension between them isn't as captivating as between Zag and Hades. And some small stuff, I did like Zag coming out of the blood pool, and the House of Hades is a much more interesting hub than the camp you set up in Hades 2. But I did just get a frog buddy in Hades 2, and I do like that when Hecate, your witch teacher, talks to Charon, it's just two people in big hats talking to each other, which is what I want to see from a video game. But I don't need Hades 2 to be significantly better than the first, to be honest. If it's just as good as Hades 1, then it will be very, very high on my Game of the Year list. Now, did you think the great trailer for Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave was all we were going to get this year from the franchise? You fool. You absolute fool. You should have known that Nintendo was going to drop a mobile-only Fire Emblem title starring furries that is part auto chess and part Among Us called Fire Emblem Shadows out of nowhere. They put out a press release a few days ago saying, "Hey, this is coming today," and about an hour later, it was available to download on smartphones. It's developed by Intelligent Systems with support from DNA, and people involved with quote-unquote real Fire Emblem games worked on this title. It's co-directed by Kohei Maeda, who has been with the series since The Binding Blade and co-directed Awakening and Fates, and perhaps more importantly for this game, the gacha title Fire Emblem Heroes. The artist also seemed to have a background in Heroes as well. So this is not just some game they farmed off to a random team, it is IS proper handling it. Now, I'm obsessed with the fact that Intelligent Systems pretty much releases at least one game per year on Nintendo hardware, and they had a streak from 1998 to 2021 that was broken in 2022, albeit barely, because they released Engage in January of 2023. They also had Paper Mario last year, so would this game count in their new streak, something only I care about? I'm going to say no, because a phone is not Nintendo hardware, and this doesn't look like it's getting a Switch port anytime soon. Okay, so what is this game? I described it as auto chess meets Among Us earlier, a phrase that doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what it is. You have a hero and you team up with two other characters to fight enemies. Your movement is automated, but you can cast spells by dragging the spell to part of the screen. It's completely real time, so that's new for the series, I believe, and you do need to be careful as not to just waste your spell because somebody walked out of the way. Now, after the first battle, you then vote on the traitor. See, one of the three are indeed on the enemy's team and have been subtly or not so subtly trying to impair you. You vote for who the bad guy is, aka the Shadow, they're revealed, and then the two remaining heroes fight the Shadow in the second round. It is genuinely an interesting mix of genres, I'll give it that. It is far more quick and streamlined than I imagined when I read the concept. The whole ordeal is done in maybe 2 minutes. It's map 1, vote, map 2, you're done. Since this is a mobile game, you want something quick, something you can finish in a few minutes while you're on the train, but I don't know if I've ever seen one of these social deduction games be reduced down to something you could finish in maybe 100 seconds. Now, since everything is so streamlined and quick, can you still evoke the feeling of both a Fire Emblem strategy game and a game where you are trying to find the liar? I'll say, sorta, for both. Your hero does have a loadout, and you can mix and match spells and weapons, so you can have a build. You can prioritize some types of attacks and skills to suit your gameplay. Even after a few rounds, you'll probably have 24 spells at your disposal. But it is hard to achieve synergy with the other characters. Okay, I have green attacks and my teammate has blue attacks, so we can work together to prioritize our strengths. However, there's no way to communicate with anyone, either through voice or ping, so you're just kind of hoping your teammate knows what they're doing. And since your movement is automated, that does add another wrinkle of strategy to the gameplay that you wouldn't see in other Fire Emblem games. I was fighting the Shadow with another hero, and the Shadow swapped places with me right as they were about to get hit with magic, so I got hit with the magic from my teammate. There are also attacks where you can swap spaces with enemies and AoE attacks, so the fact that everyone is moving around does kind of make you think about timing your attacks more carefully. There's definitely strategies to the game. It does go beyond just spamming Fireball, but since the matches are so short, you don't really get to use the breadth of your moveset. And you might think, wait, if there's no communication, how do you know who is the bad guy? During the first phase, you were supposed to kind of just look and see who is doing what. You can deliberately just attack heroes with spells, but that might give it away. Also, keep in mind, you technically can't lose the first round, even if all the heroes die. The main goal of the first round is for the heroes to deduce who is the Shadow, and the Shadow is there to deceive everyone via their actions. Afterwards, you vote, but again, no communication. You just tap on who you think is the baddie. The game actually does give you an in-game hint that may or may not be helpful, like this hero was attacked with shadow magic. Maybe they're good? Maybe I'm a genius, but I do deduce who is the Shadow more often than not. Sometimes I have been tricked though, I admit. It can also be tricky if heroes are using the same character, so you're like, okay, wait, which Panther girl was hit with what? Also, attacking yourself with shadow magic while you heal others is a pretty good strategy to throw people off base. You can kind of game the in-game hints to your favor unless people are just really astute and just figure out what you're doing. You get buffs based on if you correctly guessed who the Shadow was, or if you're the Shadow, if you split the vote or weren't picked by both heroes. The buffs you get for round 2 are helpful, but they're not that game-changing. Even if you are the Shadow and both heroes pick you, it's not like you can't win. I will say it's probably more fun to play as the Shadow than the heroes. The Shadows have all these unique spells and can summon enemies. And again, all the characters in the game are, I guess they're furries. I don't know the dividing line between human and furry, but for example, the Panther girl has cat ears and a tail, but when she turns into her Shadow form, she is full-on anthropomorphic panther. A lot of the art is pretty great, and obviously the VIP has been the Uma Musume Lin, who can turn into a centaur with their Shadow form. Centaur Lin has already been added to Fire Emblem Heroes, so it does make me wonder if this entire project is just a backdoor to canonize furry versions of established Fire Emblem characters. Ironically, this game is not a gacha. You don't pull characters. Instead, there's a battle pass if you want to spend money. But like gacha, the game has 1 billion currencies. You need to level up each individual character, and also the Shadow version counts as a different character. Then you need to level up each individual spell or raise your level cap. They've perfected the math for this type of game. They know the exact number to get people hooked. But without the gacha mechanic, the urge to pull characters, I don't know what else is supposed to be the hook here. Matches are so quick and winning and losing is almost inconsequential, so it never feels like, man, if I just leveled up my AoE thunder attack, then I'd be cooking. You lose and you're like, so what, next match? The game is getting a lot of negativity, and many are calling it the worst Fire Emblem ever. And I guess it kinda is, unless one of the FE games I haven't played was just fundamentally not fun. Shadows is a creative combo of genres, and there is depth and strategy to the gameplay, but I think realistically you have gotten your fill after about maybe 30 minutes. I honestly think it would be more engaging if instead of grinding for mats and leveling up, they just had a ton of characters in the game with a locked moveset that are just all very different. And then the fun comes from trying out all the different characters. Day 1, here's 20 characters all unlocked from the start. They have 4 spells each. Try them all out and see which one you like. Then have the paid elements be purely cosmetic. Have Christmas Centaur Lin. Have Halloween Centaur Lin. You will make money from that, I promise. I think the new characters in the game have a lot of fun designs and the art is great, so I don't think it needs to be bogged down with all these other gacha mechanics and currencies. Just sell the JPEGs. You will make money. I don't know how long this game is going to be around realistically. There's no way it becomes even 1/10 as big as Fire Emblem Heroes, but I do like that Intelligent Systems is willing to experiment. And hey, we have a big Fire Emblem game coming out next year, so it doesn't feel like this is hampering the progress of the franchise. If you are an FE fan, you will probably get a kick out of the designs and enjoy it for about a half hour. Everyone else, you could probably just skip it. But don't skip Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave next year. That will be good, I promise. Alright, that's it for games, so let's check out the news. A lot of news has happened, but I think TGS was the biggest news item, and I talked about that, so what else is there? The biggest Nintendo news is probably that Doug Bowser, Chief Operating Officer of Nintendo of America, is retiring, and Devon Pritchard will be taking his place. Satoru Shibata from Nintendo of Europe is also coming to the States to become the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer. This is both huge news, but also probably isn't going to affect a whole lot on the consumer side, at least not now. They're not going to slash the price of Switch 2 or rename it to Super Switch in America or anything like that. I don't know much about Pritchard as opposed to Bowser, who I was certainly aware of before he even became president of NOA, but she's worked at Nintendo for nearly 20 years, so she has probably been on the shortlist for quite a while. Shibata coming over is a bit more interesting. I'm kind of curious about that move. But again, as people get older and further into their career, they want to have new challenges and, of course, a better paycheck. America is Nintendo's biggest market, so I think any notable change up there is likely something that has been a long time coming and not some sudden change. Ironically, Kimishima and Reggie left shortly after Nintendo launched the Switch, and Bowser is now leaving shortly after the Switch 2's launch. I do wonder if that kind of plays into anything. This went well, so I'm a head out. In Tokyo, the Final Fantasy IX pop-up cafe is still happening in Paselabo, Shinjuku. You need a reservation, but the neighboring taiyaki place called Katsugoro is selling both slime and chocobo taiyaki, and you don't need a ticket or anything at all to try that out. I've had both, and the slime is red bean while the chocobo is custard, so yes, the slime is just way, way better. In general, that place is pretty good. The bread is more thick and pancakey than a lot of other taiyaki joints, so check it out if you are near Shinjuku. Dear Me I Was, the visual novel from ArcSys and folks who worked on Another Code and Hotel Dusk, is coming to Switch. Like Switch 1. It was strangely a Switch 2 exclusive, but it makes sense to move it to Switch 1 as well. Fun note, it did have a demo at TGS, and I did see somebody trying it out. I kind of wonder how that game demos, since it is basically a long cutscene you barely interact with. But if you don't have a Switch 2, you can soon play it on Switch 1. Also, I had a big episode about this game a few episodes ago, so check that out. And speaking of ports, Resident Evil 2 is getting ported to the arcade. Bandai Namco is bringing the game to the arcades in spring 2026, but it will be a light gun game. So you can just unload on Mr. X. Arcades are no stranger to having weird light gun versions of console games. I mean, Luigi's Mansion is the example. But will we get more Resident Evil arcade games? I would like to see them all be different types of games though. RE2 is light gun, RE3 is whack-a-mole with Nemesis, 4 can be a quiz game. There's a lot you can do with the concept, trust me. One last bit of news, Stray Children from the creators of Moon is coming out October 30th. This year is just getting more and more packed, but I will definitely be picking up that game and maybe be featuring it on the podcast in a big way. It came out in Japan last year, and I think impressions are quite positive, but let's see if the quote-unquote Moon 2 can live up to its predecessor. Well, there's nothing else I want to talk about, and this is a longer episode than normal, so let's just wrap it up. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well, it really helps. The podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. The next episode will be on October 19th. See you next time. Matane!